So formally welcome everyone to our weekly call, which you just heard. We are now recording. Right, let me share my screen again to shamelessly give me the opportunity to put up the sort of graphic from the World Cup, which for any of our friends from the US, unusually it's a World Cup involving teams from other countries. It's a concept which makes things a lot better, arguably as a World Cup, but there you are.
And no longer involving the USA.
I was tactfully not going to mention that bit, right, but there you are. Yeah, that is unfortunately also true. Right, so in terms of agenda for the call, I'm just going to revisit a topic we touched on briefly last week, which is the European Commission's high-level group on internet governance, the HLIG, and then we'll sort of rattle through some recent developments, forthcoming events, etc. And hopefully this time we have time for AOB, which usually we don't. And definitely not a slight on the World Series, Michael, in response to your chat. But yes, we're putting the world into the World Cup, I suppose would be a polite way of putting it. But there you are. Right. So let's kick off then. So I mentioned last week that the European Commission held its most recent meeting of its high-level group on internet governance. It's actually a day-long meeting which they split into two halves for anyone that's not familiar with it. The morning part of the meeting is open to all comers to attend. The afternoon is basically reserved for the Commission and representatives from the various member states. So it's sort of basically a government level meeting. So these comments or these 2 points I thought which were worth just reprising are from the morning meeting. So the two things I mentioned very briefly last week were, and which I sort of were two of a number of matters which were on the agenda from the morning. One was that they've announced an internet standards monitoring site, and they also touched on their DNS4 EU project. So taking those in turn, as I say, that they announced the availability of this monitoring site, which is intended to monitor the sort of progress with the sort of deployment and sort of take up of a range of.
Los muss ich mal was laut machen. Moment, hören Sie mich?
Hang on, let me just mute Ralph momentarily. Sorry, so the website was to monitor a range of different internet standards, which were sort of split into 5 groups around browsing, routing, email, naming, and addressing. Well, as they defined it, 18 standards in total. You'll see them in brackets. But what I thought would be useful, just very briefly, if I can get to the right content, I'll show you the actual site, just so you can see what is intended. So
we only see a blank.
yeah, bear with me. So if I share, hopefully you can see the website.
Yes,
When
yes,
shouting me, I'll take that as a yes. So in essence, this is the front screen, which just gives us a brief intro, explains here a bit more about the groups of things that they monitor. It's slightly tenuous that there are 18 standards, but the chart shows you the various standards or the 18 categories as defined. But there is then a page, sorry, for each of them. If I go back to the home page. So if I, for example, click on the obvious one, DNSSEC, again, it explains it in a bit more detail, just what is being monitored, what the current state of play is, then presents it visually, and quite amusingly, it says sort of current adoption rates medium, although there's quite a fragmentation amongst them, with some member states better placed than others. The better placed is anything from 5% in Romania through to 95% in Finland, which is quite a broad a broad spread for that particular one. And if I'll just go back just for completely show you maybe one other one. I'll show you the manners one for a bit of variety, which same basic approach, but obviously there are more charts because there's sort of the 5 separate categories as defined, which again you can see the sort of take up there. So a slightly narrower range compared to the DNSSEC. So that's basically what the site does, and I think the intent is that will be updated over time. So anyone that's got interest in that, you can easily go to the site and sort of track progress with those various deployments. But I thought it worth mentioning, given that it includes DNSSEC amongst other things on there. So yeah, potentially worth your while taking a look. The other thing which I touched on last week, but just in case anyone missed it or as a reminder, I asked a question under AOB at the end of the meeting about what the situation was with DNS for EU, given that the stated intent when the project was kicked off at the start of this year was to have the grant awarded this calendar year. That is still the intention of the Commission, because I think the budget is only allocated this calendar year. So they are under pressure to complete that process before the money sort of disappears. So they sort of reconfirmed that in the on the call a couple of weeks ago. But when I checked this morning, there was still nothing visible by way of an announcement. So obviously we're now in December, so it's getting a little tight. But apparently we should hear something before the end of the calendar year. So in roughly 4 weeks' time, there should be an announcement as to which consortia has been successful, assuming that there is a successful outcome to this. And yes, so just looking in the chat, Kurt, yes, I think the site literally only measures EU member states take up. So as far as I know, it's not 0% in all of the other countries apart from the EU member states, but you never know with some of those. But anyway, I thought it worth just mentioning those two topics in particular from the HLIG meeting, in case people had missed those, because obviously not everyone would have been on the call. If anyone else is on this call that was also at that meeting and picked up anything else you think is particularly noteworthy, feel free to jump on, just unmute and just sort of highlight anything else you think is worth mentioning, or pop it in the chat if that's easier. I'll just give you a moment to do that if you think it's worth doing. Yeah, so Michael, did you want to come on?
So I got an echo from somebody. So how do they consider Europeanness in this case?
So it's purely the member states of the European Union that are being monitored. So no countries other than EU member states.
Well, what I'm trying to ask is, if IBM has an email server in, well, I guess Zurich won't matter, but in Munich that answers, is it considered to be a European service, even though it's a US company? And conversely, if Siemens has an MTA running in San Francisco, maybe on RIPE address space, would that be considered?
That's a fantastic question. Let me just see. In fact, let me share this screen so that you can see what I can see. Otherwise, it will be probably a bit frustrating for everyone. So if I go back to the methodology, I'm just scanning down there. So let's see if we go to the email one specifically. So that was a perfectly good question. Let's see if the methodology makes that clear. Hmm. I'm not sure if it's that clear. Let's look at the data sources.
I think it's even more interesting for manners, for instance, because you can have non-European companies present at an IX,
Yeah,
and we would really like them to do manners when they're at that European IX. And of course, we'd also like to count the fact that European ISPs, when they appear in, Washington, D.C., also do manners and everywhere, because if they don't, then there's a vulnerability there.
yeah. So from a quick glance at the methodology, it's not clear to me. I mean, it's got the data sources, but it doesn't say what data's being counted. Simon, you got your hand raised. Do you have any insight into that, or was it on another matter?
Well, no, sorry, I can sort of offer insight, having just spent the past week discussing related issues, but they were not internet. It tends to be principally on the physicality of where the device or service is actually located. So if we look at the German and French governments, they've adopted national services from companies that are arguably controlled from outside Europe, but it's been the physicality of that service within the country that has been the driver. And looking at their other pointing at STOs at Etsy, with which I'm intimately familiar, their focus has been on where the physicality of the people are, rather than from where the company is headquartered, although that is a factor as well. There is still ambiguity in there, but I think we can probably presume it's based on the physicality of where they perceive the service to actually be located.
Yeah. And good point on definition of countries that Kurt has highlighted. I'm pretty confident, for example, it would include Madeira and the Canary Islands. I don't
Yes.
think it will count places like French Guiana, though.
No, but it would probably include from Saint Pierre and Miquelon off the Canadian coast, and Reunion Island somewhere out in the Atlantic too, or is it the Pacific? Because of course they are legally territories of the European Union as part of France. So, we've got this sort of all these ambiguities are probably available if you want to poke hard enough.
Saint Pierre and Miquelon will be very happy to be counted for something. I guess the interesting point is we need to measure before we could do any kind of anyone could think about regulation or mandatory type things. You've got to be able to count things and figure out where you're at, and do you even need to do this? And so I guess, at some point, some countries are going to put some regulation on things, and they'll have to decide what it applies to, and does it apply to French Guiana? Yeah, exactly. So,
Yep.
but I think it's also important for us to, when we're understanding the trends, that we could have a European ISP that does manners worldwide that inadvertently bumps the statistics for Africa, right? When in fact it's not really happening there, but suddenly, all of cable and wireless is doing it there. So it's something to understand.
Yeah, good point. So there's a lot of complexity to this, which I clearly hadn't even occurred to me in looking at it. But yeah, those are great questions. Definitions matter in all of this. It is early days, though, in fairness for the site, but it might be worth people, if you think things aren't clear in the methodology, etc. I think it'd be worth just dropping a line to the using the contact link, because as it is early days, I'm sure they can sort of clarify some of these things, because they'd be useful for other purposes. Right, so let me go back to sharing my original slide. Right, so as I say, so that site is there. I think it's only recently been sort of made available. So it'd be interesting to watch how that sort of evolves over time in terms of the what the numbers look like. And as I say, on the DNS4EU public resolver, we should expect an announcement in the next 3 to 4 weeks on the grant award, unless there's a change of plan at the very last minute from the Commission. So watch this space, I think, is the message on that. Okay, so that will take us on to some recent developments, which I thought I'd just sort of go through some of these as always. So you'll find all links to all of these in the weekly headlines as well. Probably the most topical one you will have seen is it's 35 years ago that the two sort of initial DNS RFCs were published by the IETF. So RFCs 1034 and 1035, way back when. Yeah, quite detailed documents. One of them, I think, about 50 pages, or thereabouts, including an index and bibliography, which was all quite impressive, but format not hugely dissimilar to the current RFC format. Which was good to see. So they are 35 years and counting for the original DNS spec. I've changed the subject completely. It was the Internet Governance Forum last week, which, as we discussed on this call a couple of weeks back, very so huge variety of content on the agenda. It's a rich and varied agenda. I think about 300 different sessions over the course of 5 days, and the recordings when I'd looked earlier today weren't up yet on the site. At least if they were, I couldn't find them. But I did find the sort of Ripe Labs had put out a live blog last week, which just gives their take on some of the more interesting developments through the 5 days. So if you have time and inclination, you might find that worthwhile just dipping into to see some of the different topics that came up throughout the week at the IGF. It was an impressive looking venue from what I could see in Ethiopia at the UN Conference Centre. In a similar vein, Jeff Houston, even from APNIC, published last week some further notes on the ITF 115 meeting from the start of November, so a whole month ago now. So his sort of random notes, as he called them, are now available on the APNIC site. There was a sort of product announcement from Power DNS. An updated report from UNI on internet shutdowns in Iran, which included further measurements of encrypted DNS resolvers being blocked by the Iranian government. I'll just click through, so a couple of other things that were noteworthy. Oh yeah, Murray Nodal, who some of us will know from the ITF, amongst other things, CTO at the Centre for Democracy and Technology, has sort of put together her thoughts on DNS privacy measures and some of the trade-offs between DNS privacy and a range of other things. It's if you use that link, it will take you through to GitHub, where it's got the current draft of that particular document. So if you've got any comments on it, you can put those in through GitHub in the normal way, which I thought was worth highlighting. Sorry, Peter, I just noticed you got your hand raised. Did you want to come in?
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's the echo thing again. Yeah, thanks. It was just another thing that I thought was cool this week, or recently, was the RC annotations from ICANN. They've got a list of all the DNS related RCs and ones related to IDNA and the root service and name registration lookup. And they have them all in a handy place, and you can view them and the annotations to them as well. So for RC 1034 and 1035, they look like this, which are just very cool, I thought, really handy.
Sorry, thank you, Peter. I'll for anyone that's listening to the recording, I'll put that on the sort of notes to the company the recording, so it'll be on the web page as well. Obviously, anyone that's listening live, you can see the link in the chat from Peter. So thanks for that, Peter. That's helpful. Kathleen, speaking of things that were mentioned on the call, Kathleen last week mentioned a report which I think I forgot to include in the notes accompanying the call last week. So just on the off chance that I did, I've sort of included it here so people can see it and click through to it if you missed that last week. Other fun things, actually, going back to the Internet Governance Forum, Milton Muller, who I don't always agree with, but I enjoy his take on things. He's from the Georgia Tech's Internet Governance Project. He put out his thoughts on some of the discussion in the IGF around fragmentation, which was one of the big themes of the IGF this year. So he talks about sort of fragmentation and digital sovereignty. So as I say, I don't necessarily agree with his take on everything, but he's certainly put, in my mind, quite thought-provoking. So that's worth a read if you have the time. And finally, in a sort of policy vein, you'll also see at the very bottom of the screen, the European Union has been activating a number of anti-disinformation hubs, which now extend their support across all European countries, basically doing fact-checking of stuff on the internet. Bit more to it than that, but that's a very simplistic take on it. So topical given some of the developments in Twitter at the moment. So I thought that was worth a mention. Okay, just looking at some forthcoming events. There's quite a few coming up. There's actually one more this calendar year, which I spotted this morning on, which is on the transatlantic sort of data privacy. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to click on that. Let me just go back, which is sort of coming up tomorrow. So I thought that was worth highlighting for those of you that have a sort of interest in policy related matters. It starts tomorrow morning European time, so do bear that in mind. But certainly this morning it wasn't too late still to register, so I assume that's still the case. If you want to click to register to attend that. I think that was arranged or set up by Echo, amongst others, if I remember correctly. As you'll see, there's a whole bunch of events in the first sort of part of next year, so plenty of stuff coming up in the new year. Also, there's largely accompanying those events. There's a whole series of calls for papers, workshop proposals, etc. The one which I wanted to highlight. So again, let me stop the sharing so I can swap between my two screens if I do this correctly. So let me just reshare my browser screen. So this is a call for papers, which you'll see there's a journal of cyber policy, and they've got a special issue coming up on the DNS. And so they're inviting papers for that special issue. On the screen, you'll be able to see the various topics that they're looking for input on, many of which will be very familiar to people on this call. So it's something that some of you may have contributions already to hand that you might want to submit or might want to consider writing. It gives you information on how to do that. And there, as you can see, there are 3 deadlines which run through well into the sort of middle of next year. The first call's just gone. The second one is in March, and then in June. So there is time to do it if that's of interest to you. So given the subject matter is all DNS orientated, I thought that was well worth mentioning, on the assumption that there'll be people that would be attracted to that. So consider that highlighted. Right, let me just go back to my.
Andrew, is this a document?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Say again.
Is that a free document or will charge for that?
I don't know. I've never subscribed to the Journal for Cyber Policy before. Bear with me. Let me just have a quick see if I can find it. Visit Journal. Apologies, I'm probably covering part of the screen in order to look at this. So you've got a bit of blank screen there. If I try and access a previous issue, let's see what happens. It seems like you can download the issue. Oh, fair enough. So on the face of it, it looks like you can just access it without, there's no mention of a charge so far in trying to access it. So yeah, it looks like it isn't charged for, but sort of do check that for sure. But it seems as if it's readily available. which is a pleasant surprise. And as you can see on the screen, there's a whole series of other calls for presentations and proposals for different events coming up. So plenty of opportunities to share your expertise throughout the start of next year. A reminder, I think I said this last week, we won't have calls. You won't be too surprised to find on the 26th of December or the 2nd of January. The first call in the new year is not tentative because Peter has now confirmed that. So I'll update that. But will be on the irony of blocking popular trackers. People want privacy, but at what cost? Which trips off the tongue. So we'll. Peter will share his thoughts on that. That'll be the first call in the new year. Just so you know, and then you can see sort of various other things we've already got coming up after that. And I think that was probably, yes, that was pretty much everything I had to share. So let me stop sharing and see if anyone's got any sort of observations on any of that, or more importantly, anything else that you wanted to highlight this week, anything you picked up over the last week or so. So if you have, feel free to use the Zoom tool to raise your virtual hand or pop something in the chat, whichever is easier. Simon, do you want to jump on?
Just a quick one before I jump to another meeting, so apologies, I'll just be quickly after this. At Etsy last week, along with the Commission and the French, German and Dutch government colleagues, we stopped what we see as a new IP related activity that has been there for several years, called IP evolution. We cited that it was an undesirable place to be developing it, and that IETF was more suitable for direct protocol development, and that there were other parts of Etsy and 3GPP that could carry out the development of the use of the protocol. Sorry, the use of the protocol rather than develop the protocol per se. In terms of what they were doing within their committees, we did not wish there to be a committee that was apparently so close to writing protocol issues. We were also supported by industry, because sort of alone we do not have any voting ability or the ability to achieve a consensus. Just using government representatives, given that sort of 800 plus of the 900 members are from industry rather than from government. Thank you.
Sorry, I muted myself. Out of interest, Simon, how was that received by whoever was sponsoring the proposal?
I'm aware of the answer to the question because I sat there and I heard them. The prime sponsors, I suppose, are in fact Cisco. The chairman is an academic working for Cisco, and there's a Cisco staff member who's vice chair. Also Huawei is a supporter too. So effectively, I suppose you could say Cisco and Huawei are the main supporters. Cisco were neutral in tone. We had no comment from Huawei.
Okay, thank you.
I will drop in the chat a leaked, well, not a leaked report. It's a public report, but I would note that the content is relatively accurate, having sat through the meeting. Even though it contains things that weren't supposed to escape in the public space, but the content is relatively accurate. So I'll drop that link in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. I was surprised when you said that it was part sponsored by Cisco, but there you are. It was. So yeah, okay. We look forward to clicking through on that link with interest in that case. So thank you for that. That's sort of first hand from the Etsy meeting. That's good to know and very topical. Thank you for that. Anyone else have anything from the last week or so that is worth sharing? Again, as before, use the Zoom tool to raise your hand or pop something in the chat if that's easier. I'm not seeing anything at the moment, so I'm assuming not. In which case, let's sort of, I think, call it a day there. So we finished slightly earlier this week. Just gives you a bit more time to prepare yourselves for the next kickoff. For those of you that are watching the football, which I have a personal interest in because I'm in the sweepstake with my local barbers. So Spain are still in the competition. I'll win £100 if they win the World Cup. So you never know. I might be very happy in a week or so, one way or another. Anyway, thanks everyone for your time. Have a fantastic week as always, and look forward to catching up same time next week. So have a great week in the meantime. Thanks all.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.